What's up, guys? Hope you're doing great. This is your boy Kobe Shots. In today's video, I'm gonna get you started in Premiere Pro. This is a non-linear editing software which is used by professionals to edit films, documentaries, and whatnot. So if you are enticed, let's get started. So this is my desktop, and I have added Premiere Pro to my taskbar. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just click on it. I'm using the Adobe Premiere Pro 2020 version. So once I click on it, the splash screen loads. So let's wait a few moments until it opens. All right. So Premiere Pro 2020 is open. Okay. So this is what I'm welcomed with, and I'm welcomed with recent projects that I've done in the past, and that's because I've been using this for quite some time. But if you are new, you're definitely going to be met by this. And with this, it is simply the same thing because you are starting out with Premiere Pro for the first time on your PC. You are going to be met by this, and all that you need to do is simply create a new project. Okay, so I'm not going to start with my recent because these are projects that I've touched and I've worked on. Some I've done with them, others I'm still working on them, and so they just get back to me as recent, so I can easily access them without going to find them on my desktop or wherever it is that I've saved it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on new project. Okay, and the new project window opens. So I have name, I have location. With the name, I'm just going to type Kobe Shots. Okay, and the location, it is telling me that's in Drive C, users, Kobe Shots, desktop, and that's where it's going to be. So it's going to be found on desktop if I should save it. But if you want to change it, you can easily click browse, okay, and select wherever it is that you want to save it. Let's say documents, let's say pictures, let's say music, wherever it is that you want to put it, you can just easily put it. But I'm going to have mine on desktop. So I'm going to select folder. And next up we have general, scratch disks, ingest settings. I'm not going to touch any of these because these by default are quite okay. You just have to leave them as it is. But with the general, that's where I'm going to do a few tweaks, okay, if they need be. Here I'm going to be maintaining my Mercury playback engine, GPU acceleration. That's what I'm going to use as my renderer, but you have other options over here, but I'm going to stay with this because that's what I normally use. And with display format, okay, time code, you have feed frames 35, 16 frames like that. All right, and the capture format, we have DV, HDV. I'm going to keep mine at DV. I'm not going to touch whatever it is. So if you want to go along with what my settings are, you can just punch in these if yours comes and it's different. All right. Okay, so I'm going to leave this box unchecked, display the project item name and label color for all instances. I'm going to leave it unchecked, and I'm just going to hit OK. So the only thing that I did was the name as well as the location where I want to save my project. Okay, so when I hit OK, it opens my project for me. Okay, so my project is divided into compartments. All right, so we have the source window, we have the program window. Here we have the project where you can locate your files, or you can drop in your files and navigate through them if you drop them in here. So you import media to start, and over here is a timeline where you're going to find your sequence. You're going to catch, you're going to edit, you're going to add sound and all the effects that you want to add onto your work. Okay, over here we have the selection tool, which can be easily accessed with the shortcut key V, and we have track select forward tool. We have ripple edit tool, and all these can be seen by their names when you hover over them and stay on them a while. There's a hand tool and type tool. Next to it is T, which is the shortcut key. All right, so these are where you can locate your basic tools. Okay, and underneath over here we have the list view where you're going to find how they work or how they operate when we have our imported media over here in this box. Okay, so basically that's what you are met with. And over here in this panel, you have learning, we have assembly, we have color, editing, of course, that's where we are. We have effects, we have audio, graphics, libraries. Okay, at the top over here, the title bar is yet another menu, set of menus, as I should say, where we have file, where in new you can either select a new project, you can forgo this already existing project I've opened and open a new one, or team project, sequence, title, legacy title, Photoshop file, and all these, which are going to go into it in a bit. Here in edit, you're going to have a drop down menu, set of them where these are dormant because you haven't uploaded or imported any files in there, or the timeline is also not active, so we can have these active. You're going to find them active once we start working in them. We have clip, we have sequence, and all these are going to be accessible when we've activated our project file, when we have imported media to start. All right, down here in the media pool, we have browser, we have info, effects, markers, all right, and history. All right, we can even add captions to it, which I'm going to show you how to do that later in this video. So to import media, you can either go over here to file, then all the way down here to import, or you can use the shortcut combination key Control+I to import. All right, so I'm going to hit import, and I'm going to find exactly where the files that I want to use, the footages that I want to use are. Okay, so this is where my files are. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to hit on B-rolls. Okay, and this is where all these files are, and I'm going to move all these files at a go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag all over it. Okay, all right, and hit open, and it's going to import all the files into my media pool. So let's wait until it's done, and I'm going to show you yet another way you can do that easily without having to navigate, but you can just drag and drop your folder of the footages into your importation or your media pool. All right, so my files or my footages, my rashes, however you may call them, are actually all over here, right? I normally tend to choose to pull my folder or drag it all the way into the media pool because I don't have to select all these cat and create a new bin before I drop it back in there like this. I simply have to drag it in, and it gives me a new folder that looks just like this. But here it says bin, and so I'm going to have to rename it if I had a lot more than just the bin folder in the media pool. Okay, so I'm going to hit rename and name it Ice Trophy Rashes. Okay, all right, and it changes the name to it, and I have my files in here. But this is what I would do. I'm going to minimize the window, and I'm going to just drag the folder that has the footages in here, and I'll just drop it, and it imports the files, and I have my folder in there. Okay, but because I already have the files in there, I'm going to maintain this folder. Okay, I don't need to duplicate the footages. All right, it just increases the size of the project file, and of course I'm not going to like that. So the next thing to do is to double click and look through your footages. Okay, so this is where you can navigate through your footages, and originally if you shoot with your camera, definitely you're going to have it in a sequence as it saves, but these are scattered all around. It has been scrambled, so I'm gonna have to put them in order. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna left click over here, okay, and I'll hit name so that it reverts it back to the sequence or in the manner of which I shot the footages. Okay, so that will give me a clear understanding, because basically when I'm shooting, I have the editing sequence also in my head, so it makes my work much easier. So when I get here on the editing bench, all that I have to do is to make sure that it's in the same order so that I can easily access my files and know when I shot what and how to use them at what particular time. Okay, so that's about that. And if you want to go back to the media pool into or outside the folder, you just have to click on this to send you back. All right, simply like that. So yeah, I have my footages, and that's my source file. Okay, so if I double click on any footage, it's going to display in my source window. Okay, so I can push the playhead as I want. Actually, this is called a playhead. It is not called a blue head or whatever it is. It is given the color blue, but it is called a playhead, and that's because it runs through the footage, so you can find a spot where you want to cut, where you want to end it. So equally, you can click on any footage and it gets displayed over here like so. All right, just like so. And I'm just scrolling through this as I'm hovering over the files, and I can just easily double click on my footages and it gets displayed here on the source window. Okay, so that's exactly that. But since I have my source window displaying my footage, I need to find where I'm going to actually assemble and cut and place my footages. So simply where I'm going to deposit the cut shots, how I'm going to arrange them, I need to create a sequence over here or a timeline where I can do that. So that's what we're going to do next. So if you want to create a sequence, what you're going to do is, even though you see the word sequence over here, but because you don't have any sequence, this is not going to be active, okay, just like you see. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit on File, New, then you're going to create sequence, or the shortcut combination key is Control+N for sequence. So I'm going to click on sequence, and it's going to open a new sequence window for me. Don't be intimidated with all these options, okay? These are a lot of options, but I'm going to make you stick to RE. And if your footages were shot in 1080, then you're going to have to make do with these, all right, in the 1080. Or if you shot them in 4K or higher, then I would advise you pick the 2880p options. Okay, so I'm gonna go with 30. Okay, you can as well go with 23.976 or 24, 25. All these options are there for you to pick, but I'm gonna stick with 30 because normally that's what I do. And when I'm exporting my videos, then I export them in 24 frames or still export them in 30 frames per second as I wish. Okay, so I'm gonna stick with RE 2880p or 2880p 30 frames per second. Okay, so once you have what you're going to select highlighted, it's going to give you some information over here, which is the preset description. Okay, so these are basically presets that are set within the space or within a project file, okay, where you can change or you can even create your own presets and save them. Okay, but for this tutorial is going to be for beginners, and so we're not going to go so much in depth. You're going to stick with the already existing presets in the software. So these are the general details about the preset we are going for, 30 frames per second RE2880p. So we have 30 frames per second, we have video settings, the frame rate, the frame size, we have the pixel aspect ratio, and all of these. Okay, so you just stick to this and don't be too much bothered about this because this is eventually going to work with your footages. All right, so you can also as well rename your sequence. So I'm gonna stay with, let's say, drinks advert, because that's what the footages are about. It's a commercial that I filmed for a drink. Okay, so let's say drinks advert. All right, so I'm gonna hit left click, okay, and it creates my sequence for me, and it has my name that I gave it. All right, so the drinks advert is what the sequence is named after. If I continue to create much more sequences, it is going to appear over here. So let's just go through that. All right, if I go to new and click on sequence, the same process, and I name this, let's say, another, it's going to create yet another sequence over here. And that's what's open right now. So if you see this underlined, that means that's the activated sequence. Okay, so I'm gonna go with my drinks advert sequence, and I'm gonna delete this because I don't need it. All right, okay, so drinks advert is the sequence, and it has 30 frames per second as the frame rate. Okay, and that is basically that about the sequence when you create it. And once you create it, you're gonna find a lot of tracks over here. We have A1, V1, V2, A2, A3, and the V and the A just simply stands for video, audio. Okay, so the very first track is called V1, which is video 1, and we have A1, which is audio 1. Okay, so simply what we're going to do is we are going to see how this works with the footages. Okay, so for instance, if I go through my source file, okay, let's say I choose yet another footage. For instance, let me find one nice footage. Okay, so let's say I pick this footage. Okay, what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna have to select some portions in the footage where I'm gonna drag. Okay, so if I hit I on the keyboard, that is for in, that's where it's going to select the starting point of the footage, and if I drag into it and hit O, that is going to be where it ends. All right, so I for in and O for out. Okay, so I have more options to choose from when I have my in and my out points selected in the footage. All right, I can easily, first of all, drag by left clicking on the source window on the footage, I can drag and bring it here, and there you see two clips appearing on the sequence. Okay, and you notice that it stays on the V1 and the A1, which means it is in sync. Okay, so when I drop it, it's going to ask me if I want to keep my existing settings, because the camera settings that I shot the footage in, that is primarily the resolution, is not in sync with the sequence. So it's either I select change sequence settings or I'm going to keep existing settings. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep existing settings. But you see over here that there's a box that is checked that tells you always ask. So I would advise that you leave it checked so it always asks you this. Maybe you want to easily and quickly make selections if you want to either keep the existing settings or change the sequence settings. All right, so I'm going to keep existing settings so that I have the space to do whatever it is I want. So you notice that this is quite bigger than what you see over here. Lots of the details are actually cut in. That's because it's been zoomed in. And what I'm going to simply do is I'm going to right click on the footage, the V1's clip, and it's going to open this drop down menu. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale to frame size, or you can use set to frame size, and they just do about the same thing. So I'm going to select scale to frame size, and it scales it to the frame size. And you notice that there are black bars over here because the resolution is still very different, even though it's scaled to the size of the frame. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as it is, but if I want to still scale it to the size of the program window, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the effects control, the motion settings, where we have position, we have scale, and we have rotation, and a lot more. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the values over here in scale so that I can manually tweak however I want to fit in the window. Okay, so normally I've found that with my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema 4K, when I shoot in 4K, all I need to do is to type in 110 and it fits perfectly well, even though I lose a little bit details onto the left and to the right, but it fits in perfectly well in the sequence that I've created. The 16:9 aspect ratio, which is the standard for TVs and monitors that you can find around today. So let's go back to the source window where I still have my footage. Okay, so you remember that I dragged from the source window and it pulled both clips over here onto the V1 track and the A1 track. Okay, so let me just delete this. And what I'm going to do is I have two more options to choose from. If I want to select the visual without the accompanying audio, all I need to do is to go over here, and you see it drops down as drag video only. So what I can do is I can just drag from that, and it drags just the video clip. But mind you, if you make a mistake and you drag it over the audio tracks, you notice that it is not applicable. It doesn't fall in because the software recognizes what you've dragged as visuals only. Okay, so it only allows us to drag it over here onto the V1 deck. Okay, so I just scaled it back into the frame size. And equally, if you want to drag just the audio, it's right onto the right where this icon identifies it as audio. So you drag just the audio and you pull it over here onto the audio decks. Okay, and equally, it doesn't become applicable if you hover it over the V1, V2, or the video decks. All right. Okay, so what I'm doing is I still have my finger on the left mouse button still holding on so that I don't drop it where I don't want to drop it. All right, so I just do it this way, and it's exactly as this, just that they are separated. Okay, so let's say for instance you've dragged both footages onto the sequence and you want to split them, because automatically if you click on the audio clip, it selects the video clip as well to it. So what if you want to split them and want to move them just like I'm moving these individually? What you need to do is to select either of them. It's going to, of course, highlight both of them, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to unlink. All right, so if you hit unlink, what it does is it separates them and you can individually move them as you wish. All right, so I'm going to undo. I'm going to hit Control Z. All right, and it pulls them back to how they were. All right, So that's about the dragging of the footage from the source window into the timeline or into the sequence. Okay, so you can either pull just the audio or just the video respectively. Okay, over here is the program window, and that's where the edit is displayed. Okay, so whatever it is that you do over here, so let's say I pull just the video of this clip, displays it over here in my program window. That's where I see what I am doing. Okay, so let's just drag footages like that. Okay, okay, and you notice that I have a playhead over here as well that allows me to scan through my footages, and it projects what I've done over here. Okay, all right, so now let's go on to the cutting in the sequence or on the timeline. So we have these tools as I identified before, where we have the selection tool, which is already active. That's what we are using at the moment. That's why it's highlighted. And we have track select forward tool, which you're not going to use in this tutorial. Okay, but we're going to be using the text tool or the type tool, as well as the cut or the razor tool. All right, so the razor tool is what we're going to use next, and this is simply what we use to cut shots and join shots if you want to trim some parts of a footage. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to left click on the razor tool, or you can use the shortcut key on the keyboard C to select that. So when I hit the razor tool, you notice that the razor tool is activated. Okay, so you notice that there are no clips over here above, and that's why it is telling me that this cannot work. That's the red cross down there in there on the tool. But if I bring it over to something I can cut, then it gives me the option to cut. All right, so what I'm going to do is, if I have my playhead over here, because I have my magnet or the snap tool, which is in the magnet symbol there, it gives me hard joints or hard cuts where I can cut through. But if I have this not active, what it's going to do is it's going to give me much more fluidity through. But I want to have hard cuts. So for instance, if I have my playhead right over here and I have my snap in timeline tool active, it's going to help me just join in onto the playhead where it is, and it will snap just a touch, and it will highlight that you are just exactly where the line is cutting through the footage, if I'm making sense. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be clipping, and remember that because we unlinked these clips, the cutting only affects just one clip. All right, unlike if we go over here where these clips, the audio and the visuals are still in sync, are together. If I cut into it, it cuts them both at the same time. All right, so if you want to separate them as before, you just right click on it and you unlink, and it's going to give you access to individually cutting through either of them. Okay, so that's how we cut. All right, and so for instance, if you've cut a shot over here and you want to trim it off, you can easily just hit delete once it's selected, or you can cut and use the selection tool by clicking on it and drag it around or move it around. All right, so even though these clips are still linked, if I drag one up above, they are still linked, just that I can push it over to the next deck on the visuals because I'm pushing the visuals. So the V2, V3, V4, I can push my clip over there, but still responding to the audio. And equally, I can also push the audio and it's still linked to the visuals over there. So no matter what I do, they are all going to be moving together. All right, one doesn't leave the other, just like that. So it's that simple. And if I want to replace a shot over here or to fill in the gap over here, I can simply just bring a footage. So let's say I'm going to cut through this shot. All right, I can just bring them here, and instead of dragging this to touch, even though it works, you can also equally right click in between the gap and you can hit ripple delete, and it just pushes them closer and it pushes them to attach to the immediate clips, and that's how it works, as simple as that. Because we have more decks up above and down below for the audio and the visuals respectively, we can build on top of the footages, okay, where we can drag footages and place them on top of each other, like so. So I'm gonna drop in a lot more. Let's say I build on top of them. Let's say in this manner, okay. Can just scroll through like that. And you notice that what is up above, just like the layers, if you are familiar with Photoshop, it works with layers. What's above is always what's visible, okay? And so equally, we have some tools down here where we can use to either toggle the visibility on or off, okay? So easily you can identify the toggle track output where it's in the icon of an eye, and if I toggle or if I click it, it disappears. Even though it's still there, it hides it or it takes it off temporarily as long as this is clicked. All right, so equally, if I click on this, you notice that this footage and that footage are all disappearing. All right, leaving this particular footage, and that's what's being displayed as you see over there. So if I hit this as well, it just takes this off, and this being the last visual, if I click on it, it's gonna take it off and give me a black screen. All right, so that's exactly what these do. Okay, you're gonna skip over the toggle sync lock because normally we don't use this as much as we would use the toggle track lock. So let's look at the toggle track lock, which is in the icon of a padlock. Okay, so simply it tells you that you can just lock it, and it displays as it says. Okay, so when I hit on this, you notice that my track has all these crosses in there, which tells you that it has become dormant and you can't touch it, or you cannot do anything to this particular track or whatever footages are found on this track. Okay, but you can move these around, and equally, if I should hit this and activate the lock, you notice that I cannot move this either. Okay, so that's what they do, so that you don't mistakenly pull anything in place or out of place. All right, so now that we've understood how to place footages on your timeline or on your sequence, okay, what we are going to do next is to look at the motion controls that we have over here. So here we have position, we have scale, we have rotation, we have anchor point, anti-flicker filter, opacity, blend mode, time remapping. Okay, so we have position, which allows you to move the footage in the program screen. So on the position, we have our X and our Y axis, where we can either push our footages to the left or above or below, right? So either to our left or our right, or above and below. Okay, so you can push it down, push it up using these controls, okay? And you can also animate them by using keyframes. So you notice that we have a playhead over here, which just mimics this particular playhead, which tells you that it's actually the same. And if I should move this all the way to the front, when I have a footage selected, that's what you get to change its values. Okay, so if I should select this, it changes the values, telling me that I've selected yet another footage. Right, so with this clip that we were working on before, I can hit on the toggle animation. All right, so if I hit on toggle animation like this, it gives me something we call a keyframe. And keyframes are timestamps that allows us to move our footages or animate them at a particular point to a particular point. All right, so let's just go through that real quick. So if I have my keyframe pushed over here into the footage, and I push the playhead over to another spot, and I touch any of these axes, okay, what it's going to do is it's going to give me yet another keyframe, which will just tell me that I've done an action. So the gap in between is going to be the time frame for the animation of what was previously put to what was just put. Okay, so let's play through and see how it works. So I'm going to push the playhead all the way to the left, and I will hit play, and you notice that there was a jitter, right? And that's because I have added motion to it. You can easily switch one keyframe to the right by holding and dragging it all away across to a point, and you notice that it changes or it alters the time that all the motions were happening. All right, so that's about that. Now let's move on to scale, and scale is simply zoom in or zoom in out technically. All right, so if I want to delete these keyframes, going to highlight them and just hit delete, and it puts it back in place. All right, so that's about that. And the next thing to look at, as I said before, is scale, where we're going to either zoom in or zoom out. All right, and we can equally animate the scale with keyframes just like we did with position. All right, so with the scale, if I don't add any playhead or if I don't activate the toggle animation, nothing like a playhead appears over here. Right, so it's gonna just give me a static motion or a one-click motion to scale in if I want to position this or about. So you can use it interchangeably with the position so that you can reframe and adjust and compose your shots after you've even taken them with your camera. Okay, but you should be mindful about the loss of detail, because if you zoom in too much, you should know that you're just zooming in into already existing registered details in resolution that is shot in. So what I simply mean is that you're going to be sacrificing some detail if you should zoom in into your shot. Okay, so you have to be mindful about that. But normally I have some real estate to zoom into my footage because I shoot most often than not in 4K. All right, but that's just to let you know so that when you're shooting, you have that in mind. Okay, so if I alter these values, you notice that it changes the size or the shot, it recomposes them. Okay, so for instance, if I want to animate the scale in, I just need to, of course, toggle my animation on, and it gives me a keyframe like always, and I can drag it all the way to the beginning. So this is the starting point where I have the value 107.0, which is the starting point, and wherever I move my playhead to and alter this detail, that's where my next keyframe is going to appear. So this is the space, the span, or the entire length of the clip. So if I push the playhead all the way to the left and I hit play, you notice that it zooms into the shot, and that's because I have keyframes changing in detail as it moves from one keyframe to the next. Okay, so that's just about that. So if you hit on the toggle animation, it's going to ask you if you want to delete your existing keyframes, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to hit OK, and it takes it off. So down below we have uniform scale always checked on. If I take this off, it tells me that it's going to give me the liberty to either scale in the height or scale in the width, which normally isn't ideal. Okay, so I'm going to hit undo twice back to as it was, and I'm going to hit on uniform scale so that it scales in everything at a go and maintains the shape so it doesn't distort or contort my shot. All right, so that's about that. Okay, so the next to look at is rotation. Okay, so with rotation, as simply as it implies, rotation. Okay, so if I should alter these details, you notice that it rotates my footage and it turns it around. Okay, so that's basically about that. And it also equally has a keyframe. So if I should hit a keyframe at one end and rotate it to create yet another keyframe, okay, and I push it all the way, it's going to animate the keyframe as I made it with the keyframes. Okay, all right, so I'm going to toggle it off and delete the keyframes and return them as they were. Okay, all right, so that's basically about the basics of the motion. So you're going to jump all the way onto opacity, which simply means transparency or visibility. Okay, so you can gradually increase the visibility or you can reduce the visibility of your footages. If for instance you have another footage underneath the selected footage, if you reduce the values of the opacity, you notice that what is underneath appears over here in the footage because you have your opacity down. That's making it translucent. All right, and because this is always checked on, my keyframes are automatically shown. Okay, so that's about that, and you can easily also animate the opacity. All right, so let's say I set it all the way to 0 at the end and it begins from 100. So you notice that if I should play the shot, it gradually disappears like that. Okay, But if I should place my keyframe somewhere, it means that anywhere after the keyframe stays as the end of this keyframe. All right, if I'm making sense. Okay, so that's about that. So I'm going to toggle this off and maintain my footage as it is. All right, so we have something that we call blend mode, which is part of the opacity, which changes the look of whatever it is that you've selected on your timeline. So if I should hit darken, notice that it changes the appearance of how it appears in the show. It looks like an effect. And you have a lot more other options that you can choose from over here in the opacity. So that's just about the blend mode. So I'm going to send it back to normal. And that's about the effect control for your edit. So next, let's work with text. Okay, so if, for instance, I have my footages in place, okay, like so, and I want to add a text to my footage, the first step is to click File, New, then you navigate through, find Legacy Title, right? So Legacy Title is what we're going to use. So once we have Legacy Title open, the window is going to display the video settings of our sequence. And if there's anything you want to change, you can do that over here before you hit OK. But you can also as well name your title. But I'm going to keep it as title 1 and I'm going to hit OK. And it opens this window for me. Okay, so I have options over here just like I had over here in the tools. Okay, all right, so to my extreme right, I can pull the legacy title properties where I can alter the look or the properties of any text that I put over here on the shot. Okay, so for instance, if I click on my type tool, which is normally what's selected, immediately open this. I'm going to hover over here. You notice that my icon changes. Once I click on it, it activates the legacy title properties over here. So what I simply need to do is to type anything. So let's say I type in GO, all right? GO, I can simply increase the size, okay? And I can reposition it by selecting the selection tool and dragging it everywhere or anywhere I want to put it. So let's say I put it in here in the center, and I want to change my font type. I can just drop it down over here and look for the font that I want to use. So I'm mostly moved on to Bebas New most of the time. So Bebas New, I have other properties and looks that I want to change it into. So let me select bold, and it gives me the bold type face of the Bebas New. All right. What you see over here is a contortion and distortion of the text. So if you don't want that to happen, you can hit Shift, and as you use the bounding box, you can drag and it will maintain its shape. But if you don't hit Shift, it distorts and contours the shape of the typeface. All right. Another way to increase the size of the text is to change the values over here at size, and it just increases the size for you. Okay, so that's about that. So I'm gonna still place it there in the center, and we have font size equally. What this does, you can just change the value, and you notice that it also changes right up over here. The font family, that's exactly what this is. And we have the X, Y position, which can easily be accessible by using the move tool to just drag on top of the characters. Okay, as simple as that. Okay, so what we have over here is color, which means that we can simply change the color of my typeface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the type tool and highlight the text, hit in here in the fill, and I can just easily select any color and it appears onto my text. Okay, so my text will take the color of what I select over here. So let's say I push it all the way into yellow. I can just select it and turn it into yellow. Okay, you can equally reduce the opacity or increase opacity just like we did with the footages on the timeline. So everything looks exactly the same. They work hand in hand, and the properties have this similarity, so you wouldn't find it too difficult to navigate your way through, even though you are using this for the first time, or probably you're a beginner still learning your way around the software. We have other options over here. You can add strokes. okay, where you have options to change the color of the strokes as well, just like so. You can add some texture to the strokes. You can change the opacity of the strokes, okay. All right, and you can also increase the size of the strokes. So the size of the strokes gobbles or swallows the yellow fill. As you can change the properties of the stroke. So we have type over here where we have depth. All right, we have drop face and edge. Okay, so it was normally at edge, and that's where normally you find it. So you can change it as you please, but you notice that the stroke is happening on the inside, and that's because we selected inner stroke. And equally, if you want to add an outer stroke, it also applies to the character, and you can equally do what you just did with the inner stroke to the outer stroke. Okay, so let's say for instance this is the text that I'm going to apply. So let's add some few more characters. Say going. Once I have it over here, you notice that it is found in the project media pool, and that's because whatever I do over here is recognized as a done deal. Okay, so when I hit close, I can just access my character over here, and just like I did with the clips, I can left click and drag it on top on the footages in my timeline, and that's how it works. And I can easily access them yet once more with the motion controls, just like we did with the footages, and everything just works hand in hand like that. Okay, so that's basically about the type or the text that you can apply when you're editing your videos. Next up, let's look at effects. With effects, you have to drop this down if you can't find it over here, because it's amongst these options up here on this bar. And when I click on effects, it gives me all the effects that I have. You may not find exactly all these folders, and that's because I've imported some presets over here into the software, and so it recognizes them. You may not have them because you don't have them pre-installed, so you may have to do with the video transitions. That's normally what the software comes with. So we have dissolve, we have 3D motion, and these are just transitions. All right, they work in between clips. Okay, so let's apply cross dissolve, and this is going to happen in between two clips. So I just drag and I hold on to the key and find where I want to drop it, and immediately I drop it, it gets applied, and you notice that the effect is in play. All right, and that's basically about that. And the same process, you can apply the rest just like so, and it works exactly like that. Okay, so that's just about with the effect. So if you have some pre-installed presets, you can also apply them onto your clips and they will work seamlessly. Even though this has been a long video, this is actually the basics or the surface of what you can do with this software. But I'm going to leave you with just one more thing that you may definitely stumble over, and that is when you mistakenly drag any of the windows over here. Let's say it pushes and it destroys how the default set window looks like. You can revert it back to how it was. What you need to do is very simple. You need to find window, workspaces, and you drop it all the way down to reset to saved layout, or the shortcut combination keys of Alt, Shift, and 0. So I'm going to click on reset to save layout, and it reverts back to how it's supposed to be. So let's say you're done with your edit, and of course you want to take it out of the software, and that's what it's done by exporting. So exporting your video out of the software, having all these cut and joined footages exported or brought out as one video. What we're going to do is we're going to export it by clicking on file, look for export, media. As we click on media, it opens a window for the export settings where we have H.264 normally, which is the default. You have match source, high bit rate for the preset. Let's keep it as it is, and the output name where you can change it at all times. So let's say I'm going to change my output name and name it as let's say tutorial. Okay, and you can also change the destination of the file that you're going to export or the video you're going to export, so you can put it in documents or wherever it is. But I'm going to keep mine in desktop. Okay, so that's why I'm going to save it. So I'm going to hit save as it's in desktop. Notice that the file format extension is mp4, and that's what we're going to deal with. All right, so save, and it changes the name to tutorial as I renamed it to. Okay, so underneath we have export video and export audio checked. All right, if you should uncheck any of these, you know what will happen. So for instance, if you uncheck export video, you're not going to have your video preview exported along with the audio. And equally, if you should uncheck the audio, it doesn't allow both of them to get unchecked, so at least one can be selected as it says. So I'm gonna keep both checked, because what I want is I want both the audio and the video to be exported all at the same time. So in summary, it gives you the output settings and the source settings, which is what the settings are on the timeline, and this as the output settings. That's going to be the properties of your exported file. Okay, so if you want to alter these details, what you need to do is that you can change the format or the preset. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the preset, and I'm going to select YouTube 1080 Full HD, which is normally standard, unless probably you are exporting for YouTube and you want to maintain a 4K high resolution file, then you can select the 4K Ultra HD. But I'm going to stick with YouTube 1080p Full HD. So with that selected, it changes my output properties, and this is what we have right now. We have 1080 by 1920, 30 frames per second, and all the other details that you don't have to bother yourself about, because this is standard. Okay, so we have effects, we have video, we have audio, and all other options that you can choose from. Okay, so by default, selecting this preset, the YouTube 1080p Full HD, you don't have to necessarily touch any of these settings. All that you need to do is to change your target bitrate so that you can maintain high quality and there wouldn't be so much of a compression. Okay, so normally with this default preset, you're going to have a target bitrate of 16, and if you want to alter it, I can advise that you alter it to, let's say you increase it to, let's say somewhere around 30 or 40, 50. As you increase it, is definitely going to increase the estimated file size to let you know that your file size in the end is going to be big. So let's say if I change it from 30 to 70, my estimated file size has increased. Okay, so that's about that. So let me revert it back to 30. Okay, and my estimated file size is 56 megabytes of a length of 15 seconds for the video export. Okay, and that's exactly that. But you can easily alter the exported video from the onset even before it comes out, because if for instance you found out that there are some portions that you need to trim out, you can change this or push these playheads over here, okay, to select the portions where you want to select and export. So everything outside the selected line is not going to be exported as part of the final video, but you can easily access these settings where we have entire sequence. When you click, it just drags it all the way, and we have sequence in and out. So let's say if in your sequence you selected an in and out, that's where it's going to export it to. We have work area, that means the entire work area, and that's about that. But we're going to keep it as sequence in and out, and that's where we have it. Okay, so we are going to export the whole 15-second sequence out as one whole video. So one thing I also need to check is that you need to check your maximum render quality, and you equally check render at maximum depth. Okay, so these are going to maintain your quality for you. So you have 30 over here, and we have bitrate encoding where you can change your bitrate pass. You can either make it 2, or I'm going to stick with 1 because normally I stick with 1. You can also do that. It doesn't do so much of a difference, though expert says that if you keep it at VBR2 pass, it's going to reduce the compression, but I found out that this actually works for me, so I'm going to keep it at VBR1 pass. And I think everything is okay now, and what I just need to do is to hit export, and it starts to export my 15-second video onto my destination where I saved it, so practically onto my desktop, And that's simply about that. Premiere Pro is designed to automatically save your progress, and it deposits the automatically saved project files in a folder found on your hard drive. But you shouldn't always rely on the autosave because anything can go wrong. Your software can crash at any point depending on what you're doing. If you're adding effects or if you're adding a whole lot of things, there are some things that you have to be mindful about. So always remember to save as you go on with your edits. So with a combination key of Control S, it just saves your progress and you wouldn't have nothing to worry about. So that's basically about that. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. I have a lot more coming your way so that we can all find it very easy to learn our way around softwares that we use for photography and filmmaking, because that's what we do over here on my YouTube channel. And so share this video across all social media platforms that you belong to so that your friends can also have a piece of the cake. So until the next video, I'm going to catch you later. Have a wonderful day. See ya.